Welcome back. Let's push on with our next keynote. So next up we have Julie Bowman-Niemann, Global Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Carlsberg Group. And we are talking all about Carlsberg's DE&I Guidebook. Hi, Julie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And so much for having me here today. I've been looking through the session all day and it's been really wonderful for people sharing and learning. So yeah, it's been really cool.
Thank you for joining us. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And am I presenting now? All right. Yeah. Can you see my presentation?
We've got you on the screen, but not quite your presentation yet.
Not yet. I will. Can you see it now?
There we go. That is absolutely perfect.
Okay, but before I start this session, I of course want to start a little DE&I monologue, if that's okay. I think if you can sit back and relax, like you just did at your break, maybe even close your eyes if you feel like it, and just listen to this little story that I have. So if you can imagine that you're standing in a box, it's like a small box, but just big enough for you to feel comfortable. This box represents your comfort zone. So everything you know, everybody you associate with, and everyone you're familiar with. And now imagine this box being filled with all your experience, your belief, your culture, and even your biases. You're comfortable here because it's familiar and it feels really safe. But now imagine that this box slowly is expanding as it goes bigger and bigger. It starts to include other people, other ideas and cultures that are different from you. And it might feel a little uncomfortable at first, but then you start to maybe feel more alive and also larger as you start to stretch. You start to realize that there are more to see and there are more to learn. And sometimes it's not enough with only the people that you already have. So the bigger you make the box, the more you learn and grow. So think about the last time you expanded your box. What was that like? Did you learn something new about the other person, or maybe even about yourself? And how did this discomfort help you grow? Every time we open a box to include someone or something else that are different from us, we expand our world. Inclusion isn't just about inviting other people in. It's also about stepping outside of your own comfort zone, being willing to learn and seeing the world from other perspectives that are very different from us. And the reason why I wanted to share this little monologue is because I think when we talk about DE&I, it's very important now. We feel this discomfort. This is not something that is normal to everybody. In order for us to grow, in order for us to do something different, we need to go out of our own comfort zone. So this is why I want to talk about what it is that we've been doing here at Carlsberg. So when it comes to DE&I, I kind of feel like everybody has an opinion, and often more opinions than actual knowledge. It's different from other things, like when you talk about like buying a car or choosing insurance. Like opinions may vary and people might go into the discussion based on facts that they have, or they might not even want to go in the discussion because they don't have any facts. But we do know when it comes to DE&I, though, everybody has something to say because it can feel so vague and it's really hard to pin down. It's kind of fluffy like these clouds we can see here. So we need to make these fluffy clouds into tangible actions. And that is why we created a DE&I guidebook at Carlsberg, to make the best use of the data that we already have, to set clear prioritization for solid foundation. And this way we can make better actions that are backed with the data and the existing knowledge that we already have. We have seen in the last few years that companies have kind of focused on the same as society have told them to focus on. But what if we instead looked at our own data and looked into what we already know and then focused on that for DE&I? This is what creates more value and more impact instead of just drifting away like the clouds here and keeping that fluff. So what we have done is to make a DE&I guidebook. Today, I will not like dig deep into it, what it is the Guidebook, but I'm trying to show it how you can do it in your own company or in your own functions. So it is an overview. So as you see here, it's the D&I research paper, it's the employee survey, and the people data that you already have. So the Guidebook kind of explores these three pillars. The Guidebook is structured that you first go through the research paper, which is consisted of what is the law, the social, and the cultural norms in your country that you are. Then you take these knowledge that you have, and then you look at your employee survey data and see if this is the same trends that you find in your country and your employee survey. You might even in your employee survey find other trends or even something for the future that you have to work on. So once you have looked into what we have done with an external partner, this D&I research paper, you looked into your employee survey data, you have to look into your people data. Sorry. Because I have a sneeze, that's how it is when you're online. But then you have to look into the people data. So you need to figure out of these people that I have, how many people is it that we actually have? And what is it, the data that you're measuring in your people data, in your dashboard? So this is where we really have to make sure we use this approach. And that is what we have been working on. So when we look at the external research data that we have made for Carlsberg over the last year, it is that we have a report that focuses on these 5 different D&I dimensions. The reason why we chose these is because these are the globally known. This is what most companies work with. So we wanted to work out how does it seem in each of the countries. Within then a country, we then again divided it into what is the law in the country, what is the society norm, what is the cultural norm, and what did the employee survey data show. Then we made this color coding to kind of say, okay, so each country, where are you on each of these? You would be green if you had like backing from the law, from the social norms, from the cultural norm, and from the employee survey data. You would be yellow if there was a few challenges within one of these dimensions. And you would be red if the law was against you or there was a big society or cultural norm that would make sure that this is a really hard one to get through. What we saw in the beginning is that people was kind of scared of the red. Okay, if it's red, that means that I shouldn't work with it. But what we quickly found out, it could also be the other way around. If it was red because of society or law or norms, that was an opportunity for us to really make sure that we can make a really big impact for our employees, for our company, but also for the community that we were a part of. Because if people didn't feel safe outside, they can feel safe within our company. So this was a really big eye-opening for us. The reason why we had this report built is because that we saw that one size doesn't fit all. We can have a global strategy, a global campaign, but when we go down to each, as we took country, it would be different. You would maybe feel the same if you look into different functions. Different function has their own cultural differences. So the next thing that we really looked into was the employee survey. We call it the My Voice, the people survey. What you often do when you have a people survey is that you filter it only for what did the women say, what did the men say. But there is so much more you can do here. And there's a really big impact on how is it that you filter your employee data. So if you use broader filters, and we also looked into the research paper to see which filters is it that we should. Where is it that we see something yellow? Where is it we should see something red? But if you just filter into a woman, but what about filtering young women versus older women, or young women with different nationality, and on and on. And you can kind of make 2 reports, compare them and see, okay, the number is a lot higher here than it is here. That would mean that we do have some scores that are lower within some different groups. This is why it's so important that whenever you do a survey, but whenever you have the chance to filter that survey on the different things, here we use gender, bands, like what level are you in the organization, age, nationality, and tenure, how long have you been, and where are you? Are you a production worker, your office worker? This is where you really get the true insight of your company, because we do feel very different depending on who you are and where we're sitting. What we also saw here is that we can have a lot of data, but when it comes down to it, you can have all the data you want, but we all know that D&I won't always have the biggest budget. So you really need to prioritize also what is it that you choose. But using this data approach, we found that there's a reason why we're choosing this, so we would have a greater support, we would have a bigger backing of what it is that we were doing. And this was really important to us. So once we looked into this, it was very important for us. Then we looked into the people data. So our people dashboard. We had a people dashboard where we really made sure that we looked into also what is it that we have on age diversity, on gender diversity, retirement, tenure, talent pipeline, performance. So we saw more than just we have this number of hires. When you have this data and you compare that to the employee survey data or the research paper, we could see we have this number of people within here where we really need to do more because the data show us that we need to do more. We also sometimes saw that the response rate might be low within the segment, but then when we look at the people data at the dashboard, we could see we actually had a bigger group. So we actually needed to make a bigger focus group interviews or some extra follow-up to make sure, is this how the whole segment think, or was this kind of one of the kind? So looking into your people dashboard is really important because what it is that you see is easier to track. So make sure when you have a people dashboard to get the right things in there in order to track what it is that you're doing. What we also saw is that sometimes it's hard to figure out which project should I do, which program should I start, but it often depends on how many people are affected. You could have a group of 10 people or a group of 70 people. What should you choose? This is again where we saw what is the score from the different groups? What is the research paper showing us? Maybe some of these people needed more support from us as a company because they didn't get that support out in the society. So this can also help you choose what is it that I should do. And this really helped us also. But then what we learned is that we can have all the data in the world, but if we don't do anything about it, it doesn't really matter. So what we did after making the D&I guidebook is actually making another guidebook that was called the D&I roadmap, which we're making right now. So what is it that we want to achieve? Why do we want to achieve this with the data that we know? How will you measure, and what is the budget allocated for this? And this is really the key takeaway from the guidebook. Some people don't have data. Some people have too much data. Some people find it hard to prioritize what is it then yet you do. So by making this D&I roadmap, it makes it really easy for the market or the function to figure out, well, I'm focusing on this based on the data that I have here. This is how I will look into it. Here we also made sure to divide it. The project that you're making, is that within the diversity factor, the equity factor, or the inclusion factor? And which demographic is it that you're looking into? Is it the women, age, disability, or what was it and why was it? So this was really important for us to make sure that all the data that we had came into action. And that is something that I really urge everybody to look into. So what I want you to take away today is that today was just a really quick overview of what it is that you can do with your data. We just looked at the data that we already had at Carlsberg to figure out, okay, what is it that we can do? Collide that into one guidebook to help people, HR and manager, to figure out if you have this data, use it differently. Think about the data differently, and then make sure that it's an action. What I also really want to encourage everybody is to know that there is a big knowledge gap around D&I out there. And it's really a lot about opinions and feelings when we talk about D&I. So make sure when you meet somebody that's still in the opinion phase and not really in the knowledge phase, you take them on that journey and always give something away. And I think what we find with the guidebook is that once we had the data in place, and when we talk to the business, it really elevates the way we had the conversation into something bigger. So that is what I wanted to show with you and share today. So thank you so much for that. I know we will have to go over to a few questions also, right?
Absolutely right. Thank you so much, Julie. That was really, really interesting. And we have had quite a few questions come in. I'm aware we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to sort of rattle through them if that's okay. The first one that came through was from Orla, who says, how do you ensure that your data is accurate? For example, people may not feel safe to disclose their disability.
Yes, this is a really great question. So in the people survey, the one we have out, people can anonymously say how it is that they feel. But when it comes to disability data, that is one of the hardest ones that is out there, because in a lot of countries, like I live in Denmark, you're not allowed to know it. You're not allowed to ask it. You're not even allowed to track it. And this is really a big hurdle for us, global company that wants to do something about it. So this is where the guidebook, the research paper also help us. What can we do within the law limit that we have? And the only way we could do this was focus interview and then try to do it as best as we could.
Brilliant. How do you encourage participation from employees for these surveys?
This is actually on our leaders. So this really helped once we gave it up to the high level leadership team to make sure this data is for you. This is something that you want to know. That was when we found that the employee survey data really went up. If it's just for the employee to be like, oh yeah, maybe I do it, but if the leaders like, I really care about your opinion, I think this is important, that really elevated the next step. So I really wanted to take it up to the top leadership within the function or company that's doing it.
That's awesome. A real testament to Carlsberg's leadership as well. Jackie's asking, how do you manage GDPR requirements when collecting employee data?
Yes, that is a big thing, and that law is also changing all of the time. So that is one of the hardest ones. You really need to have a good friend in legal wherever you're sitting, because it's so different from country to country. Since I'm sitting in a global role, I can only guide as good as I can, because each country is different. Some countries we're allowed to ask, some countries we're not allowed to ask. Again, kind of the same as disability, the countries we're not allowed to ask, sometimes is as easy a look with your eyes. If you have an open landscape as we have here at Carlsberg, it's very easy to see that we maybe all look like the same in this function. So maybe we should do something about it. And then again, focus interview is also a really good thing.
Brilliant. How often would you update the guidebook, Nimisha is asking?
We would do that once a year, not to confuse like a big thing. So once a year, we would look into it, especially as the last question with GDPR, there will come new rules. So unless there's like a big thing emerging, it would be yearly that we had to look into it. Something might change, some things may never change. There's also a lot of great example. You could do this and this and this. And then we would also start updating it with great initiative from each country that they're doing.
Amazing. And one last question before we wrap up. Where can you find the DE&I guidebook?
Sadly, this is something that we have worked about internally. So if you want to know more, please reach out. But again, this is something that you should do in your own company. Look at the data that you already have. Elevate that data and make your own guidebook. That's why I didn't bring in the whole presentation, because I really think it's important that the company does from the perspective that they have. If you don't have the same amount of data, the guidebook will just kind of see, again, maybe a bit fluffy. So take the data you have, mandate that you're missing some data in order to make real DE&I changes, and then go from there.
Incredible. Thank you so much again, Julie.